received Head Start and emergency services through Community Action Partnership. So there's 11 distinctive data points that are there, and within certain types of databases, you can isolate that so that you know exactly what that target is. And that's pretty cool information. So we have to be able to know who it is that we're serving, again, so that we can not only provide appropriate services, but also so that we can procure the funding necessary in order for us to be able to provide services to the target population in need. So,
Wow. So do we count, just quickly, do we count households or do we count total people?
and that's where, that's one of the distinctions that we have to be able to make. In the IS report, sometimes that language would flip-flop between households and the actual individuals served, and with certain programs. So we just have to make sure that we are, and I don't know how it reads on the.
You'd be capturing that data in the relational database so that you could report on either. Because
Yeah,
both,
yeah, yeah,
both sets of
exactly.
that data could be
Yeah.
captured.
Because we know
Yeah.
That's what-
gun
Then how do you
departments,
report
we know numbers of cases and then how many people are in that.
Exactly.
But maybe the whole agency doesn't do that.
Well, and that's, you know, and we've ran into that before with the IS report, which now again has been replaced with this annual report, which is the online version. So that kind of calculates some of this, which is really helpful. But we've ran into that before where I took over some programs and started producing these outcome numbers, and it was like, holy cow, this is a total departure from what was happening last year. And it was because there was that discrepancy between households and number of individuals served. So we have to have consistency with that language, and that really falls on the shoulders of sound management and making sure that we as an agency are aware of that, and that also we're tracking the trends as we analyze the data that we put into these reports to be able to self-correct and to say, you know what, before we submit this, we're going to fix this so that it all reflects real consistent language. So these are all things that we have to look at. So let's see here on page number 54, Carter's key questions, we're going to move on to number 3. Okay, what services do you give them? So we have to determine which clients receive which services resulting in specific outcomes. Okay, so you have to be able to link that service to the outcome, otherwise we can't claim that outcome as a benefit if we can't say that the service created it. We have to identify how many services were offered, so like a number, like that count of them, how often the service was offered, like the frequency of it, and be able to recognize and assess the quality of the services, okay? So we have to determine the relationship between the service and the expected outcome. So this is a key evaluation of, you know, just our effectiveness and our efficiency of the program, is making sure that we see that that service or that output produces the outcomes that we're reporting on and that we're hoping to achieve. Cool? Wow. Yeah. So, we are going to talk about number 6 here, which is identifying outcomes. And this is just, we identify the outcomes that we hope to achieve through a client's participation in services. What happens as a result of. We need to identify the number of clients who are projected to achieve this. So when we're planning, we're talking about that, you know, talking about implementing a plan, but our plan is based off of a projected outcome or a projected idea of how many are going to achieve that. And then we have to be able to look at the number that actually achieved that outcome. So we make our guesstimate and we base that off of program data. That's a data-driven, guesstimate of the number that we're going to serve. We look at program capacity, and then, we make those projections. So if only one service is provided, it's easy to say one service equals one outcome, but sometimes you can get multiple outcomes for one particular service. So you have one service, one outcome. You can have one service, multiple outcomes. You can have multiple services, one outcome. You can have multiples and multiples. So lots of different configurations of how that might look. We're going to jump into page number 55 here, and this is a page that is going to introduce the concept of outcome indicators. Okay? So in Drucker's book, he talks about like a mom and pop mental health sort of rehab center where they took people with SDMIs, so seriously disabling mental illnesses. They took them into their services. These are people that hadn't responded well in any other setting, and they decided that they were going to define some goals and figure out how to become successful in making sure that people achieved positive outcomes. And so in order for them to do that plan, they had to be able to not only define their outcome, but also figure out how they were going to count that. How are we going to put a number on that? What is going to be our indicator? Lisa's wanted to put numbers in this whole time. This is our fiscal person. So now this is the part where we're going to start talking about that part of the conversation, okay? And so what they were able to do is, their goal was to improve mental health, and that's awesome, but we had to be more specific than that. So what they said is, the indications of that are going to be a decrease in the number of hospitalizations. An indicator of that is going to be decrease in, the number and the length of the hospitalization. So they just further identified. You get more specific and more specific as you come through. So we have on here our outcomes. We're going to work on what it means to define an outcome indicator, and then we're going to move forward and actually develop one for our plan. So with this, we have to understand that an outcome indicator is something that is going to, it's going to quantify change, okay, so that it's going to, bring the numbers into that process. So if we look on page 55, we see, we've already talked about this a little bit, we're going to be adding the numbers into these outcome statements, and the outcome statement is a general statement of change without numbers, right? So we've already, our general statement of change is that families have access to affordable housing. And the indicator is the statement of how much something has changed or how many has changed, okay? So it contains real specific information. What we see here is just a real quick visual of what that process looks like. We start off, again, we have these national performance indicators or our agency goals, and that is something that's a real broad category. Remember those? Those are like employment, housing, so just general domain names. We identify what kind of outcomes we want to achieve. We're going to decrease poverty, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And below that, we're going to have our outcome indicators. And those outcome indicators are going to provide us with more meat and more substance. It's going to quantify the type of change that we hope to accomplish. It all relates back to that national goal, but at each level, we're getting more specific with defining what our objective is. Is that cool? Okay. As you see on page number 55, outcome indicators have to meet all of those items that are listed there, starting with measurable. Another way of doing this is with SMART goals, and I did bring a poster today of SMART goals because that's just a really usable acronym, and we actually see that across a number of the programs that we operate at Community Action, so I thought that that might be something that resonated with this group. SMART goals, they're specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound, okay? So that means that they're going to be something that is real time specific, it's going to be measurable, all of those things, okay?
Ours says relevant.
Right.
They say attainable.
This is realistic, yeah, so I did take this from the financial skill building class,
Oh,
and so I didn't make it specifically for our purpose, but because that is part of the language that we speak with the people that we serve, I thought that it would be helpful just to reinforce that acronym, because I think that, again, just that consistency with our language and those models is helpful with moving forward, which is why, that's why we're even here, so that everybody in all of these networks across the country has some consistent language, so somebody in New Jersey gets to hear about what's happening with identifying outcome indicators in the same way that somebody in Washington is, or like we're doing right now. So, okay, let's see here. We have talked right now that, again, in order to have our outcome indicators, they have to meet all of those items, okay? All of the items that are listed there on page 55, and we're gonna use the SMART ones. So let's turn to page 56, where we're gonna jump in a little bit here with some examples so that we can think about how this translates to day-to-day type stuff, okay? So what is school success?
Graduation, good
Okay.
grades,
So graduation, like receiving a diploma,
Yeah, literacy.
okay, literacy,
Going on to higher level of education at certain points?
okay, absolutely.
Reduction in expellation.
Yeah. And
Suspension.
non-voluntary
attendance,
removal
right.
Yeah.
from the academic, yeah, okay. So, yeah, those are all really good examples. And so we have to decide really what indicates school success. Improved grades, which we would see like with a report card, okay? Reduced absences, so again, data on a report card. Improved behavior, see, these are all listed out there. And so with those, we're gonna have a baseline, and then we're gonna have something by which to measure some type of a change. So these are all different ways that we would have indicators of, this happening. Improved use of the English language could also be an indicator. And so again, we're gonna wanna make sure that we have some sort of baseline there and some assessment process to really calculate what that change looks like. So those are outcome indicators, and those are something that can be kind of quantifiable as well. Let's say, I don't know what the grading scale is on the best test, but let's say that you got a 60% the first time and an 80% the second time. You're able to see that progress is being made. We can make that quantifiable because now we've assigned some numbers to achieving that level of outcome. So again, we can also look at things like increased family functioning, and that could be just through global assessment functioning scales. So we can look at these standardized scales to help us with gauging and really being able to evaluate progress or change as a result of the programs or services that we offer. So let's identifying the indicator, it requires more specificity than what we have above. So
Over what time?
we have these things, yeah, exactly. So like, how many are gonna get that type of improvement? What are the is 20% a reasonable amount for us to expect? We have to be able to figure out, get that level of definition there so that we have that level of specificity. We can say, this is the number of people that we're gonna serve. We're gonna see a 20% improvement rate on their performance on the best exam. These are the
Wow.
things that we're gonna do. So we have to include the number of clients expected to do something, and the number of clients expected to achieve the specifically defined change or outcome, and that has to be in relationship to the number who receive the services over what period of time. So what we might say is we're gonna have 20 people enroll in this class, we're gonna say 15 of them are gonna achieve something within 6 months. So we just have to be able to fill in those details, okay? Does anybody have questions? We're gonna jump into how this actually gets then used. Yeah, I'm sorry, they're cutting concrete next door,
I know, the
so-
smell is starting.
I know,
to come in.
I'm hoping that, yeah.
Food right here.
Oh, maybe it's.
No, it
yeah.
smells.
Can't even smell anything.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh.
can you close that, although it's kind of like tar or chemical smell.
Yeah, sorry for being.
I have a feeling it's coming in through the,
I do too, I do too,
That's why I was all
but it's not too
cleaning.
bad.
Oh,
So
no.
to find it on my iPhone,
Ah.
so it was in the parking lot at Smith's.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So on page number 57, if I could have a volunteer read the example number 1.
in some cases, okay, go ahead, you got it. So, okay, the outcomes achieved by recipients of service may fall along a continuum. Sorry.
Oh, you go ahead.
You sure?
Yeah, you're good.
The outcome of employment and training services to 50 clients is obtaining a job. The primary indicator is 10 of 50 clients obtain full-time jobs above minimum wage, including benefits, and are employed
Wow.
90 days after placement. Other indicators could include 20 of 50 obtain permanent full-time jobs at minimum wage without benefits and are employed 90 days after placement. 10 of 50 obtain part-time temporary jobs. 5 of 50 improve skills and experience through on-the-job training programs, and 10% remain unemployed after 180 days in the program.
Okay, awesome. So here what we see, first off, we're putting numbers on things, and this is the first time when we've seen that. The first time we've seen that we're making a projection, and then we're talking about the people that actually achieve that result. But then the other thing that's interesting about this example is that all of these outcomes that we're reporting on relate back to one goal or to one outcome of employment. So all of these results that we're reporting on relay back to the goal of employment, that outcome of employment. And so sometimes you can have multiple outcome indicators for one outcome. And so we'll see in example 2 that in other cases, when referrals to other services may be involved, there may be multiple outcome indicators that cross a number of different domains. So with this, the outcome of providing case management services to 20 families could be self-sufficiency, and there's a whole range of indicators, and there's a list there of all of the different possible things that could be included in terms of an outcome indicator. And so with this, we want to make sure that we're counting all of the participants or the recipients of that program. So we want to make sure that all 20 are reflected, but like with example number 2, people could achieve things, 3 people could have the increase by 20%, and those same 3 people could also have purchased a home. So they can be reflected in different places. People can achieve multiple, outcome indicators related to that one outcome goal of increasing self-sufficiency. Does that work? You feeling okay about that?
And you have to determine these at time of writing the plan or at time of measuring your outcomes?
So what we do is there's certain information that's available to us when we write our plan, and then we come back to it and we report out on the specific accomplishments, because there's stuff that we're just not gonna know at the time that we put our plan in place. It's just really our ability to,
So initially, it's up in the air a lot more than.
So we're gonna work right now on identifying
It's
an
gonna be
outcome
hard.
indicator, okay? So before we start to talk about this, we want to go back on our flip chart to services, okay? Are people able to see that? Remember, we're saying provide financial assistance to access housing. And so we have these services that are outlined there. We are not on page 13, we are on page 58. So we're going to be using that services as something that we can build off of right now. And so what we want here is, now we're going to ask this question of how many people will be receiving financial assistance.
How much money do we have?
Yeah, exactly. So,
That comes later.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know which
So
comes first.
What we want right now is we want to identify how many people are going to be receiving the service. And so this is
Right.
going to be our denominator, okay? And then we're going to have the projection of the number of people who are expected to achieve this outcome of families have access to affordable housing. And so,
87 of 112.
what's that?
How many people do you, how many clients is this over a year?
Yes, so, well, we get to define the time frame.
Right.
So we
How
have
many
the
per
ability
month?
to do that right now.
Good question.
Okay. What we'll do is we'll talk about how many people are seeking assistance to get in, okay? So that will be our first thing. So we figure on average, there's about 30 applications each month of people that are applying to get assistance to get into housing
At our agency?
at our
Are we
agency.
including
Okay.
household size in that? Or are we including
We're just doing
students?
actual number of applications. So we're gonna say there's about 30 applications per month. And so,
Okay.
so we can say that 180 applications over the course of 6 months.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds right.
So what realistically are we gonna say is going to be the number of people who are able to get that financial assistance as a result of the case management services that we have?
So you have some history, one would assume.
11.
But you could start.
30%.
right?
Yep, exactly.
Right, or a
30
percentage,
Yeah,
right.
exactly, yeah. We're not gonna put a percentage in quite at this moment because that's something that comes a little bit further.
Oh,
But
but it's
it is something.
how to
that
get a
can-
number.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Right.
Lisa, what is 30% of 180?
Where's my adding machine? I think that's about 9.
About 9?
Of 180?
Six.
Oh, I was looking at 30,
Six.
sorry.
Exactly. So, okay,
It is 54.
54 dollars.
I was
54?
looking at
54.
Okay, so 50.